the US is going to emerge as the microfactory center of the world. This is what I believe the USA is making their comeback on. The ability to run small batches, very focused on demand regionally, being able to be super agile in what they actually produce and how they produce it with quality. And they're applying the same technology that we provide, but towards this, not just intelligent factories, but microfactories. So I think you'll see a renaissance of manufacturing in the US.
All right, well, welcome to Manufacturing Insiders. I am Nate Wheeler, your host. I am a passionate manufacturing lead generator, one of the best in the world, if I do say so myself. I have a pretty amazing guest with me today. He is Errol Rodericks. He is the global head of marketing, product marketing for Denodo, which is a very interesting technology platform that if I try to explain it, I'm not going to do it justice, so I'm going to let Errol do that. But let's suffice to say that he has a vast amount of knowledge about manufacturing technology systems and how to tie them all together and make intelligent choices with the data. So welcome to Manufacturing Insiders, Errol.
Thank you. It's nice to be here. Thanks for the opportunity to speak.
You are very welcome. So give us a little bit of a rundown on Denodo and what its application is in the manufacturing space.
Sure. So Denodo is, the actual term is a logical data or a data virtualization platform. It sits at the intersection of manufacturing operations and intelligent decision making. We don't replace any systems. Instead, we connect them in real time. So operation teams can see what's actually happening across machines, people, materials, suppliers. That unified operational view is what allows manufacturers to move from static planning to adaptive planning. So we're a logical data management platform that allows operations to actually see what's happening, whatever the vertical, but in this case, we're focused on manufacturing. So that sits across all manufacturing data systems and gives you visibility of data without actually moving the data. We don't need to move the data. So we enable manufacturing and supply chains to operate as intelligent systems, adaptive systems.
So when I walk into a manufacturing operation and they have this great control center with with televisions and data streams and all this information coming in, if they're not using Denodo, what are they doing wrong? What is the deficiency in their current setup a lot of times?
So there is a gap currently in all manufacturing operations. Manufacturing leaders, they're using lots of technology, as you say, lots of sources of data, but they're also under pressure to improve throughput, reduce downtime, raise quality. And daily operations still feel like a constant battle to them because schedules are out of date. As soon as they're published, quality issues are detected too late. And every disruption creates a ripple effect across the plant. So despite years of investment in automation, digitalization, and all kinds of smart factory initiatives, most organizations remain fundamentally rigid. That's the problem. They're efficient when conditions are stable, but conditions are rarely stable nowadays. When demand shifts, when suppliers are late, when logistics are disrupted, or workforce availability changes, the real challenge between manufacturing today is not a lack of technology. It's a lack of operational adaptability across the entire value chain. So that is what is lacking. And that's the gap between planning and execution. Most manufacturing environments, they operate with a structural disconnect between how work is planned, how work is executed, and what is actually happening on the shop floor. That disconnect, the production planning systems assume stable inputs, operations teams deal with constant change. There's the gap. This is where Denodo makes the difference. It allows them to become a living system, a living organization, if you like. So when schedules that no longer reflect reality or machines are waiting for parts or people, quality problems are discovered after they've already scaled local optimization that hurts global performance. That's when you need a Denodo. And this, what's emerging now, is the ability to become an adaptive manufacturing organization. That's what Denodo brings. That's missing, that adaptive flexibility, the agility to continuously adjust schedules, to dynamically balance lines, to respond to disruptions in real time. Uh, Shifting work between plants or production cells, that often happens, and you need to be on top of that. So it's about continuously realigning operations to reality. And that's the difference between a non-Denodo and a Denodo transformed manufacturing environment.
Wow, very interesting. So let's try to make this more tangible.
Right.
So you sent me over some case studies, and I took a quick look through them. Can you give me an idea of when a manufacturer was suffering because they didn't have access to the real-time data? Maybe
Yep.
they had the data, but it just wasn't being interpreted correctly. Or give me a physical kind of an example of how this worked.
Okay, I might give you a couple just to actually frame this. So let's take one of those case studies, those examples I sent you. It's a plant. It publishes a weekly production schedule on a Monday, but by Tuesday morning, one supplier shipment is late. And that's what happened. Two operators are absent, and the machine is starting to drift out of tolerance. All this happening at the same time in real life. So the schedule is technically still valid in the system, but completely disconnected from reality. And that's what happened. Every leader in that organization started to recognize this. It shows how planning assumed stability, but operations live in volatility. So they used Denodo to actually supplement what information they had in real time without moving any data, without changing anything. It would give them alerts as to what's really happening on the shop floor. And not only that, they used AI to help decide what to do next to counteract that drift between what they planned and what reality is. So that's one example. This gap between planning and execution was very, very valid. Actually, it was valid in more than one of those case studies. So most of the schedules in another one were built using yesterday's inventory, yesterday's demand forecast, and yesterday's machine performance. The moment anything changed, the plan became historical. So, and this was a consumer electronics manufacturer that built 10,000s of units based on a forecast, only to discover that real demand has shifted to a completely different SKU, a different stock unit by the time production started. So again, they used Denodo to get a real-time view of reality. And another one hit their local efficiency target by running large batches. But downstream distribution centers ended up overloaded. I think it was with the wrong products, while high demand SKUs were out of stock. Again, this mapped directly to optimization versus transformation, which is what I talked about before. And I can go on. There are lots of examples. We saw examples where AI initiatives were failing because a manufacturer was building a predictive maintenance model using sensor data, but it didn't know what product was being run, which operator was on shift, or whether the machine had just been serviced. And this model, it looked impressive when you looked at the model for AI analytics, but it never became operational until we entered the scene. It needed to be complete. The AI needed real-time, complete, and trusted data. I don't know if this is illustrating the point I'm making. So these were real examples.
I think it is. And what I am curious about. So I'm kind of the dummy in the room here. I'm assuming somebody that somebody that is familiar with these systems would be able to draw some conclusions about what you're going to do with the data and how that's going to actually change things on an operational level. But for me personally, I'd be interested to hear what. Okay, so now you have this data. Now instead of just knowing based on the sensor data, what the machine is doing, now you know what part is running on that.
You know what part is running?
What sort of adjustments are made?
So at any one moment in time, and I'll use this collectively right across all the examples I gave you, not only do you have the sensor data, not only do you have up-to-date information about supply chain routes or routes, you've got up-to-date information about what demand really is, how demand has suddenly shifted, the focus on totally different products. So demand is changing, not just in terms of volume, but also in terms of what's exactly needed and where. You can now feed all this through, or in fact, that's what the Denodo platform does. It feeds all this through in real time. And not only that, it now allows things like Agentic AI to take action, to say, reroute this, change that. Your demand is different. We need different types of different types of production schedules now for this region. And all this in real time. So they're very, very agile, very responsive. And once that happens, you've now got a completely transformed factory. You've got a factory that's alive, it's listening, it knows not only what their plans were or what was planned, it knows what's happening in real time. And this is the beauty of a Denodo system. It gives you real-time extended information, things that are likely to affect what you're doing, like demand changes, but also supply chain disruptions for various reasons, alternative sources. All this is happening real time and being acted on real time, whether it's in small batches or large production line runs. That is where Denodo comes in. It gives you up-to-date, real-time information that's extended beyond your core data that you have, that you're operating your factory on or your plant on. You've now got a real finger on the pulse of what's really happening and what to do about it. And
Right.
and that's now making the difference in manufacturing today.
Very interesting. So is there a mechanism then for Denodo to communicate back to any of these systems? So based on the AI made the interpretation that our scheduling is now, it's going to have to change. Can it then talk back to that ERP and say, X, Y, and Z factors need to be changed here?
Absolutely. That's the whole basis of Agentic AI. So while Denodo itself is not an AI Agentic AI engine, it provides that information into the agents that then go and tell SAP or other manufacturing systems based processes, stop doing this, start doing this. And not only that, it actually inserts itself into the workflows and takes action and says, we'll take care of this for you, giving you constant feedback as to how you've now changed your production run and how much it's improved. So yes, absolutely, that feedback is crucial. That's what we call the last mile.
Right.
And the last mile is getting that to actually now deliver the business outcomes they're looking for, or they now know they need, as a result of all the predictive AI and all of the insights they get through generative AI. The agentic AI steps in and starts taking action, feeding back into the SAPs of this world and saying, this is what we're going to change, and then they proceed to do it. Know that at any time, there's human intervention possible. So if a human wants to enter into that loop and say, stop, I want to check this out, you can. But yes, the feedback is absolutely there. And that's what's really moving this along.
Right. So it seems to me that, a manufacturer would have to have achieved a pretty high level of digitization
Yes.
for Denodo to be, to take you that extra mile, right? Or that last mile. What sort of company is Denodo an appropriate solution for, and what systems do they need to have in place for it to even make sense?
Okay, so let's start with if they haven't reached a level of digital capability, we help them get there. There's we address the needs of a whole range of manufacturers, from the smaller microfactories to the very large manufacturers. Whether it's in automotive, semiconductors, even consumer goods, pharmaceuticals. So they range in sizes. It's the agility that they need to survive in their environment. So a microfactory might be doing micro runs combined with micro workforces that are flexible, but all the way up to a very large consumer goods manufacturer who's producing large runs. So for them to be able to do this, they need to be able to have a flexible data architecture. Okay, so they will have a data architecture, almost certainly. There'll be some centralized lakehouse or some other data repository,
Yeah.
but that will only address one of three types of data. So that would address what we call the core data, the stuff that SAPs rely on. But what's missing are two other types of data. One is the extended data, or the legacy systems that don't sit within that. So there's information coming in from all kinds of places, especially when it comes to things like regulatory compliance. And then the third category is the real-time and transitory data. This is data that doesn't stick around for long. It's too short-lived to be put into a centralized system. So those two other categories of data, that's what's missing, and that's what Denodo brings in. Now, at that point, once they have the ability to pull all those three types of data in on a real-time basis without disrupting anything, this isn't let's uproot all this and put in a new system. This sits alongside whatever they have already, and it brings them into what I call the space age now of manufacturing. It brings them up to speed, and now they have the capability, but that's not the end story. That now says that you have access to all the sources of data you need, and more importantly, you have trusted access. This data is now trusted. That's where Denodo comes in. It ensures the governance that we need around making this data trustworthy. But the missing bit then is the analytics piece, the artificial intelligence piece. So often they need an AI stack, and that's where we partner with people like AWS, who have an incredible AI stack, and that brings in mainly three, maybe four types of AI. So there's obviously the Agentic AI, which says, now that we know what's wrong and what we have to do, the agents take over. The agents then come and insert themselves into the workflows that SAP and whatever's implemented there. But we also bring in the generative AI, which is giving us constant insight, and the predictive AI, which says, this is about to go wrong. So you better pay attention to it and do something about it.
Yep.
So when you combine all of that AI stack with the ability to address the complete data architecture that they need access to, now they are digitally ready. They're digitally ready because then from that, we generate these things called data objects. And data objects are assets that normal people, not IT literate or not particularly AI literate folks can use. And they might be things like a compliance framework to say you're about to breach compliance here, and it'll give them an alarm. That's one type of data object. Another one might be a dashboard to say your predictive maintenance is going the wrong way. You better do this, and do you want us to deal with it? So these data objects that we provide completes the picture. So now they've got data objects, they've got an AI stack, and as they say, they're cooking with gas. At least that's what we say.
It's a fascinating product. So
yes,
being kind of have a global footprint in your position.
Yep.
What countries are you seeing do really, really well with this? And which countries are you seeing, if you can say a country, which countries are doing very poorly? And what do you think the repercussion of that is? Like, an example is, I hear a lot of these manufacturers that work with China and work with Chinese manufacturing, and they say they are so far ahead of us in terms of digitization
Interesting.
and automation. And, to me, the repercussion of that is we can't compete with China. There's just
Correct.
absolutely no way we can compete on cost. In a lot of cases, we can't, it used to be you get it from China, it's going to be low quality. That doesn't seem to really be the case so much anymore from what I'm hearing. So just as a frame for my question.
Okay, so you're right. There are some areas that are falling behind others. So let's deal with Asia, Asia Pac. Now, as you might guess, Asia Pac is the Uber manufacturing region in that they engage in all kinds of manufacturing. We recently worked with some electric vehicle manufacturers in China, in the Republic of China. They were excellent at some things, but not great at others. And I'll come to what they were not great at, but what they were excellent at was all the things that you would expect in a highly automated, highly digital environment. So they've embraced the technology. They named Denodo as the provider of unified data for the whole country for all the electric vehicle manufacturers. So we have got a real inroad there, and that's enabled them to now compete, as you say, in the global market. So we've got the likes of Tesla, etc., who do really well. But now you've got this third generation of electric vehicles coming out of China that are truly a sight to see. So yes, they are competitive. There are equivalents of them in other parts of the world that perhaps don't have all the access to all the data they need and are trying to do it the old traditional way. They're optimizing piecemeal, so they're getting better at one system in isolation of another, rather than taking this whole holistic view to what they really need to build together. So the competitive aspect is yes, Asia Pac is emerging as a large source of intelligent manufacturing, and in that's not just China. You've got Japan, you've got South Korea, you've got parts of the ASEAN region. They're all coming up to speed with all different specialities. I'll tell you this though, the U.S. is going to emerge as the microfactory center of the world. This is what I believe the USA is making their comeback on. The ability to run small batches, very, very focused on demand regionally, being able to be super agile in what they actually produce and how they produce it to quality. And they're applying the same technology that we provide, but towards this, not just intelligent factories, but microfactories. So I think you'll see a renaissance of manufacturing in the US, for example, on this basis, and people will start to look to the US for these production runs that are micro, if you like, that are all important, because if you're dealing with let's say consumer packaged goods and you're focused on the top well-being products that are in vogue, that's constantly changing, the US can respond to that really quickly now, and we've seen that. So we're starting to see that. In parts of Europe, yes, there are regions that are falling behind. Germany, of course, the DACH region or the German region, they are now learning to not just be as flexible as, say, their counterparts in Asia Pac, but actually to partner with them. So you're seeing big partnerships forming between the automotive manufacturers of Germany and the automotive manufacturing of China. And we've seen these joint ventures now come together to actually then move forward. So, the globe is stabilizing. They're normalizing, I should say is the word. They're normalizing on this is the way production should run. They're recognizing the strengths in different regions. China is probably best at alternative supply chain sources, in that they've got access to a lot more. But like I said, there are specializations. Europe in general tends to focus more on very complex manufacturing. The US on micro factories. So that's what we're seeing across the globe. I don't know if that gives you a picture of what's happening, but yes, the ability to compete.
It does, yeah. And I want to dig a little bit deeper into the microfactory concept. So a lot of the manufacturers that I work with are, you'd call them job shops, contract manufacturers.
Yeah.
And from what I'm hearing from you, it sounds like we have an opportunity to turn them into these microfactories. They're already doing high mix manufacturing. I mean, they're already doing more or less on demand manufacturing. What do they need to understand about technology? And a lot of these companies I work with, you mentioned ERP to them, and they're like, oh, "What is that?" Or CRM. Well, no, I don't think we have a CRM. So I think
I get the
we have
picture.
quite a few steps to go. But I think it's really, really important. If this can help them become more efficient, become more profitable, do more work with less hands. I think it's really, really important to help them understand the steps that they need to take to get there.
So the first thing is they need to understand that, turning their operations into microfactories, they first need to understand that they need to be able to operate across different types of demand. Demand spikes in one market might not mean a demand spike in another. So to treat these demand spikes, to be able to manage this demand dynamically, is the first thing. I mean, they're probably using some kind of demand system right now to take in, jobs, and they need to have AI and data at the basis of that. And they don't need to be super technical about this. They just need to be able to use the kind of data products we would provide them. So here's a data product to make sure you're always compliant. So now you can operate across regions. You can accept demands from outside of the country, inside the country, wherever the demand's coming from. Because you've got this compliance framework, it'll make sure you stay legal and you stay right. So if you say that to one of these potential microfactories, that's a tick. That's to say, we don't need to worry about that now. This is great. We've got access to data from everywhere. We know when we're compliant. We know when we're meeting carbon footprint requirements, something that China wasn't great at, by the way. And we can stay compliant. That's number one. Number two, they've got automation at their hands on a micro basis thanks to Agentic AI. But you can't use Agentic AI without the right trusted data. You need to get trusted AI, you need trusted data. But once they embrace that, they can now suddenly say, we can respond to changes in demand, not just demand, but changes in demand. And changes could mean different product, different volumes, different runs at very short notice. And this distributed production without distributed intelligence just creates distributed problems. So they need to make sure that they have the intelligence in place. And the intelligence doesn't mean that they need to get super technical with IT and AI. They just need to understand that their whole operation now has to be transformed into one that's based on end-to-end operational elasticity, I call it. So they go from they can cope with a logistics disruption like that at a moment's notice. So one manufacturer reroutes production across 3 sites, rebalances labor, adjusts customer delivery promises in real time without shutting down any operation. Now, when you've got microfactories that can operate like this, they become the trusted providers. They become, we can rely on this network of microfactories to deliver what we need in real time to the right quality, to the right spec, in time, to the right cost factor. And so they don't need to be overly technical, but they need to understand that their operation has to not optimize, not try and sort of improve. Oh, we don't have CRM, so we must get ourselves a CRM. They need to get transformed. And transform says, I'll take care of your CRM requirements. I'll take care of your production requirements. If you have a system, we'll use it. If you don't have a system, we'll integrate into one automatically in the cloud if you need it. And we'll be able to direct your operations. You bring the skilled workforce. And that's the other half of this equation. So you've got agile data, you've got agile systems, but now you need agile people. And again, especially Middle America, they're starting to produce this capability right across the landscape. You've got what I call flexible, agile workforces that are ready to come in and work on a production run and then achieve success and then go back to, what's the next job. That model is starting to take shape, mainly in the US.
Can you define the agile workforce a little bit better? So let's just say I run an injection molding operation and I've got, 5 machine operators. I've got, my, operations manager, I've got my office staff, maybe 20, 30 people total. What does it mean for them to be agile? Does that mean that they're cross-trained on different, machines? What exactly does that look like?
Okay, so an agile workforce is one that can be dynamically reallocated, reskilled, and deployed in real time as operational conditions change. Now, there's a whole education behind that going on. So an agile workforce would allow a manufacturer to move people quickly between lines, cells, or sites, depending on what the production model is. They can match skills to tasks dynamically. They can scale capacity up or down as demand changes. They can respond immediately to disruptions and support a high product mix, frequent changeovers. So it's a workforce that adapts to operation instead of the operation being constrained by fixed staffing. So when you've got a workforce like that, yes, they need to be retrained. Yes, they need to be ready to work in a different model. But like I said, the US is cracking this. They're not assuming stable demand. They're not assuming predictable schedules. They're not assuming long product life cycles or fixed roles. They're now dealing with volatile demand. They're dealing with frequent product changes. They understand what skills shortages are and are addressing it. And they're operating across multi-sites. So yes, that's the new workforce that's hitting. And if I were back in manufacturing days, I'd be looking to be trained in that manner to actually say I now fit into an agile workforce. And there are some pretty good companies who are good at this in the US.
Right. Yeah, and it's a lot easier to picture when you have an operation that has 1,000 employees and a lot of different, inputs and outputs. With a small company, it's a little bit harder to visualize because there's only so many things that you could be doing. And if if you don't have the business, there's really nowhere to shift that workforce to that's going to be a profitable shift.
Yeah, the thing is that they can now, and as I said, this would almost be a separate discussion as to who's supplying this workforce, but they can tap into existing sources of agile workforce. So if I were part of that workforce crowd, I'd go and register with these, like you can do things on demand in the cloud. Imagine a cloud of agile people. So you tap into them and you say, in this site, this part of the US, we're manufacturing this kind of product. It is rapidly changing and we need these skills. And we need them on either a longer term run or a short term run. And the remuneration for them is adjusted accordingly because of the value they bring. So, they get assigned based on, certification, competency. They get assigned on task complexity, the complexity of these tasks, on safety requirements.
It almost reminds me of, I have a brother-in-law that's a union electrician.
Yeah.
And he doesn't work for a company, right? He works for the union. And if, X electric, company needs people today, then they go there. If the Y company needs people tomorrow, they go there.
Absolutely. So that's the sort of way to think about it, except that it's using a whole different set of skills now. So that electrician or that plumber or that woodworker, carpenter, whatever it is, we call them chippies in the UK. They will have been skilled up. They would have been trained on how to work on a short production run or a short job in a region where they are looking to meet certain deadlines, certain outcomes, and and then come back knowing that their next production run might be somewhere else, might be slightly different, but they are feeding their being assigned based on what is real-time demand. So there's a real-time demand there. There is, equally this kind of machine availability for that job. This is the quality standard we're working to in that particular job, and this is the kind of workload balancing we're doing for that. So
Right.
these people, these workers now have entered what I'm starting to call Industry 5. I've seen Industry 3, and then it moved to 4, which is where all the AI stuff and automation came in. But now Industry 5 is sensing in advance what needs to be done almost like a living mechanism. So I don't know if you've come across the Industry 5 definitions, but we're moving rapidly to that because of this micro approach, this micro factory approach, this agile, I call it agility, the agile workforce.
Yeah.
So supervisors can clearly see who's available, what skills exist, where bottlenecks are forming, and they adjust automatically staffing during the shift on the fly. And they can scale up during peaks, they can scale down during troughs, they can use
Right.
on-demand labor or cross-train teams without breaking schedules or budgets or anything.
Right. Yeah, that's a very interesting thought. If the injection molder in that example saw a reduction in demand, they can shed some of their overhead, some of their payroll costs by sending their guys over to the machine shop down the street, and that can work. You could have 10, 20 companies in this mix, and always
sharing this. Correct.
And I wonder how practical that is. Because why don't people do that more, right? Like, I assume some of their fears are, well, this person is never going to come back if I let them go over there, or
yeah.
I don't know. I haven't really thought through what all the possibilities are, but I assume there's a reason why people don't do that.
Well, number one is, as you say, they don't trust in the system. They still operate according to the old models, fixed schedules, fixed production runs, trying to sell to that their value proposition. But now they're rapidly finding that that's failing, and it's failing, and it manifests itself as an loss of competitive value. People are going elsewhere where this is available. So they now are learning, not learned, but they're learning to trust the system and say, skills-based deployment works, real-time staffing decisions works, elastic capacity works, and it's a win-win for everyone. So the people who would, there used to be a time where when you joined a manufacturing company you thought was a job not for life but for a long term and for a better part of your career, and you have people coming out with, I don't know, 25 years in an industry of saying, I've been doing this for the last 25 years, now saying they don't measure the years they've been doing it, they measure the different deployments they've worked on. I've worked in this, I've worked in that, I've worked in consumer packaged goods, I've worked in the very, very complex supply chain spares that go into electric vehicles or other kind of automotive manufacturing. Or I was part of the constantly evolving semiconductor industry, which is all the time improving itself, or even chemicals or parts that feed into the pharmaceutical manufacturing supply chain. So these people, when they come out, they have a mix of skills, they have a mix of experiences, but they are fully agile, they're fully elastic. They can be deployed at any one point. And at that point, I think, we're there. It's what I call the Star Trek moment. If you're a Trekkie, when Star Trek came across, the warp drive, suddenly things changed. I think this is the turning point for manufacturing right now.
And it seems like it would be, it would add up to a more interesting career. It would give you more job satisfaction knowing that you aren't going to be going in doing the same thing, running the same part every day for the next 20 years. You could go learn, machining. You could go learn these things.
You could be working in Japan. You could be working in mid America. You could be working in the north of Europe. you could be working anywhere, and
That's
it's up to
fascinating.
you. Where do you want to work? What do you want to do? And this suits the expectations of this new generation.
It
Millennials
does.
onwards,
It
very much
does.
so. So
It
they
does.
don't see these boundaries anymore. They see this as a practical way to do things. Why wasn't it always done this way? And now it can, because of the kind of platforms we're putting into place, where we don't have boundaries, we don't have borders, we don't have fixed anything. Everything is changeable, everything's real time, everything's on demand, and makes for much more interesting work, but also much more interesting output. The products that are coming to market now, you know, you can test a whole new idea in no time and decide this wasn't a good idea, and scrap it and start again if this is something that's available to them.
Right. Yeah, and the discussion reminds me of some other conversations I've had on the podcast relating to digital work instructions, which I think could be an important part of this elastic workforce, having like these highly detailed step-by-step processes. Hey, now you're on this machine. Number one, turn it on. Number two, check
Yeah,
this, whatever. Here's how you change out the tooling, all that sort of stuff. So I'd assume that concept plays pretty deeply into what you're
it
saying.
does. It's actually started to make manufacturers also redefine or think about, the Kanbans and the just-in-time manufacturing. Suddenly, that's taken on a whole new meaning. Just-in-time really means just-in-time, and and what appears on your unit in the production line that achieves these Kanbans or this just-in-time Kaizen approach. Suddenly, you're dealing with certified operators from another area, or lower risk jobs that can be delayed. You're changing things around, which tasks can be temporarily outsourced. So it's rebalanced. Stuff is being rebalanced. Talking about this agile workforce in minutes, not days. That's an agile workforce.
Right. From a, I don't know what the word is, administrative, organizational standpoint, what needs to be created in order for this agile workforce to exist and for people to be able to tap into that workforce on demand? Does there need to be an association? Does there need to be a union, like I was describing with the
Yeah.
electricians? Like, what is the organization?
So think of it as a modernized union of elastic workers. Okay. And this takes in all shapes and sizes of workers. When I say that, I mean skills, I mean attitudes. And at the very highest level, you need the new generation of business administrators, because now they're taking on jobs. The marketeers are marketing something totally different. They're saying, what is it that you want? How much of it do you want? How important is it? When do you want it? And suddenly, everything, from business promotion to operations to the financial side of it, managing the financial side of it, the what used to be, financial planning and forecasting, suddenly has changed. The planning and forecasting models are completely different, very modern. They're all asking us for data products that help them with their tasks. I'll give you an example. We one of the organizations we're dealing with said, so the CFO says, so that changes my whole planning and forecasting model to something that's real time. There's none of these quarterly or sometimes twice a year biannual meetings that they have, planning sessions that they have. It's now real time planning on the fly. You know what your plan is by today. By the end of today, you know what's shifted, what's changed. Equally, we have the HR side of it, the human resources side of it, saying, so how do we cope with the onboarding and offboarding and all of that stuff? And suddenly they say, that's gone out the window. Whatever we had by way of a workforce management system has now had to change, where you're rapidly onboarding and offboarding staff, if in fact you even have to do that, because most of these are viewed as you say, it's a good term, union workers coming in for a job and then leaving on to the next job with full trust, full guarantees, full warranties, without without worrying about, okay, they've done a bad job and moved on to something else. That doesn't exist anymore. That's all trusted. It's all measured. It's all quality. And that's why I said this is the new generation, the new era of data led, real time AI led, and also flexible workforce led production, manufacturing. And it's not just for discrete manufacturing, it's in continuous manufacturing, whether you're doing chemicals or anything else for that matter.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's a great vision. I can hear, some of the objections.
Sure.
One of the biggest downsides to unions is collective bargaining. As far as the business owner's perspective, there's so many businesses that have shut down because of that process and of workers demanding way more than than they could budget for. I don't know if there's a solution to that. I mean, because it seems like that would be the natural outgrowth of this sort of a structure.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, everything's evolving, not just the actual manufacturing itself. It's the way they do planning and the way they think about the business. And, if you were to go up to somebody like Pepsi Cola now and said, abandon your current models of producing anything, manufacturing anything, and they've got quite a range of product that they produce, manufacture. They're going to be loath to just change overnight and say, I'm going to abandon this. So they're now across the larger manufacturers, we're seeing a mix. Okay, for this sort of thing, we will use this agile microfactory approach. We'll use the adaptive rather than fixed manufacturing process. But for some stable products that we don't see a big change in, we might include a new flavor of something, but generally our existing production lines, they do the job. We've got workers. So they'll have a mix. It'll be a hybrid for the larger manufacturers. Certainly, there was resistance in some of the automotive manufacturers that said, no, we need to employ our people. We need to have our fixed structures. We need to reliably and accurately predict and forecast what we're going to be doing. And I'm not dissing that. I'm not putting that down. That was the existing way things were done, are being done. So they will adjust accordingly. Now, one of the things we found was in the electric vehicle market, we found that whatever data gets consumed, whether it's core or extended or real-time transitory data, whatever it is that they need to be able to produce these electric vehicles, the amount of data that needs to then get managed triples, if not actually 5 times the amount of data once that car is on the road, because the model has changed. Now that car is generating more information while being operated than it needed while being manufactured. So the manufacturers are staying true to some of their old systems, but now in order to maintain those cars and to run those cars, they are having a completely modernized, different data architecture, data approach, because they're dealing with a whole different set of telemetry and all the things that an electric vehicle can now do. It can tell you all kinds of things. It can tell you when to change things, how to upgrade things. It can offer you navigation that's beyond anything you have on your satellite-based systems, because it's much more intelligent. So that intelligence, that kind of change is also happening in the industry. So there's a hybrid forming. There's the microfactories, there's the fixed, and then there's the modernized data industry that's based around maybe maintenance and distribution. So all of this is, we're starting to see this impact the industry in general.
Right. Just one quick question as
Sure.
we wrap up. So if you're talking to a manufacturing shop that is fairly analog in their process, they don't have a lot of the CRMs and ERPs and SAP and all of these systems. They don't have sensors on their machines that are giving them real-time data, and they look at a digital transformation and they say, well, I just don't have $5,000 or $10,000 a month or $20,000 a month to dump into this. What do they do? I mean, are they pretty much doomed,
No,
or
no, they're
is
not doomed.
there ways to on a shoestring budget start to implement some things that are gonna help them digitize?
Sure. So what we realized was that might be the case, and Denodo, like most of the other vendors in this space, have now moved to a consumption-based pricing model. So you pay for what you use more, presumably you produce more, you get paid more, therefore you can afford to actually pay more. So this consumption-based pricing is actually a pretty fair way of handling this. So it gets the smaller manufacturing units up and running with some complex requirements really quick. Cloud plays its part. The cloud service providers play their part. So the AWSs of this world, they all kick in and say, we'll help this part of the manufacturing industry with this model. They'll get access to everything they need by way of data via Denodo. They'll get everything they need via cloud infrastructure. With that will come the CRMs or any other type of app that's available in the cloud. And it's the way, for example, if you keep up with Microsoft, you've got the Office suites, the Office 360 suites that give you consumption-based pricing already. So if you have a small operation, you pay less. So depending on what it is you're producing and how many of it you're producing, you pay accordingly. So that consumption model, that pricing model, is starting to help those companies that say, I don't have a big budget, I want to get started now. How can I get started now? And one of the things we do is offer a blueprint on how to get started. So we say, pick your top needs. We'll show you how to structure your data sources. We'll show you how to automate your AI. We show you how to get started. And we're
Very
not the
cool.
experts, but we work with people who are.
Very cool. Oh, that's super helpful, because I think a lot of companies, sort of know what information would be valuable to them, but they don't
Yep.
really know the first step to take. So I think that's really cool.
And this is it. Just so that you know, Nate, we ran a roundtable for just that recently, and we had all kinds of people around the table, and some felt intimidated by the others in that room, but they didn't need to be, because at the end of the day, they all walked out of there with a blueprint for how to move to the next step, and the blueprint was sort of customized to their needs, and that's one of the things we pride ourselves in doing.
Yeah, that's excellent. So if somebody was interested in taking that first step, what would be the best way for them to talk to you or the right person at Denodo?
Well, we have Denodo everywhere. We've got offices right across the US. Just come in and say, I want to get involved in the manufacturing industry the Denodo way. How can you help? And and the folks will take it from there. Inevitably, some of the work I produce will get used. I'll get consulted if it is needed. But we've got trained people on the ground, who get this. And at the very least, they'll walk out of there with saying, at least I got my data needs all handled without spending a lot of money. We're getting started. It's consumption based. AWS will automatically be pulled in, or somebody like AWS, maybe Microsoft Azure. But to start with, it would probably be AWS, who are very willing to help. And they'd come in and they'd give them the blueprint. And the blueprint would include, this is your AI requirements, these are your data requirements, here's how you have access to them, and this is the kind of software that you will need access to that we can now get in the cloud. And here's how you might want to sort out, if it is a microfactory they're talking about, this is how you might sort out your workforce, your agile workforce. And once you walk out of there, all you have to do is have a vision, have an idea of what it is you want to make, what you want to do, how you want to operate, and then the rest can only progress upwards from there. Of course, things can go wrong, but you got to be fairly sensible about how to do this. So there is an element of a business sense.
Right. It's fascinating. No, it sounds really appealing, and
Well,
I think there's a lot of manufacturers out there that really need to take that first step and to
yes,
get the blueprint put together. If we're going to remain competitive, if we're going to become, as a U.S.
absolutely.
manufacturers, more competitive on a global scale.
Yeah, you can't walk up to everybody and say, you've got to do a digital twin or whatever, and they're wondering what you're talking about. You just got to do it for them. Here's a data product that will automatically simulate your systems. Don't worry, it'll tell you when things go wrong.
Right. Yep. Excellent. Well, hey, I enjoyed our talk today. I learned a lot, and you're just a wealth of knowledge. You know so much about this space, and I think
Thank you.
some of our listeners would benefit from hearing what you had to say. So thanks a lot for coming on.
Thank you for having me. I really enjoyed our talk too. So absolutely.
Awesome. Great. All right. Well, we'll talk soon.
Absolutely. Thank you, Nate. Cheers.
Thank you.